Lake Windermere had been my sanctuary for nearly 15 years. I purchased the lakefront cabin from my grandfather, who had built it with his own hands in the 1970s. Every plank of cedar, every stone in the fireplace told a story of family gatherings, summer adventures, and peaceful winter retreats. The cabin sat on the eastern shore, nestled among towering pines that whispered in the breeze. Floor-to-ceiling windows faced the water, capturing sunsets that painted the lake in shimmering gold and crimson. I am not a full-time resident. My primary home and engineering business operate in the city, about 2 hours away. The cabin served as my weekend escape, my refuge from spreadsheets, client meetings, and the constant digital notifications that define my weekday existence. At the lake, time slowed down. The morning mist hovering over glassy waters became my meditation. The call of loons replaced the ping of email alerts. The community around Lake Windermere consisted of about 40 cabins and homes, a mix of weekend retreats like mine and permanent residences. We were a diverse group, retirees, young families, professionals, united by our love for the natural beauty and tranquility of the lake. We held seasonal gatherings, summer barbecues on the community dock, fall cleanup weekends, winter ice fishing tournaments. These events fostered goodwill and cooperation among neighbors who otherwise valued their privacy. When I purchased the property, I learned about the Lake Windermere Homeowners Association. Initially, the HOA seemed reasonable. Annual dues maintained the community boat launch, funded the removal of invasive lake species, and preserved our shared waterfront park. The rules appeared sensible: restrictions on dock size, quiet hours, waste management guidelines, all designed to maintain property values and environmental quality. I dutifully paid my dues and attended the occasional meeting when my schedule allowed. My background in electrical engineering and robotics automation served me well in maintaining the cabin. I installed a solar power system to supplement the grid electricity. I designed a rainwater collection system for the garden. My workshop behind the cabin housed various projects: Arduino-controlled lighting, custom security sensors, and other technological experiments that kept my mind engaged during rainy weekends. These skills were an outlet for creativity, a way to blend my professional expertise with practical applications for my beloved retreat. 3 years ago, the dynamics in our community began to shift. Our long-serving HOA president, Bill Henderson, stepped down due to health concerns. The election that followed brought Margaret Thornhill to power. Margaret was a retired corporate executive who had moved to the lake permanently. From the start, her leadership style felt different, more rigid, more intrusive. The annual HOA newsletter grew from 2 pages to 15, filled with new regulations and enforcement procedures. The first signs that something was amiss at my cabin appeared last spring. Returning after 2 weeks away, I noticed small discrepancies. The porch furniture had been rearranged slightly. Unfamiliar footprints marked the dock, too large to belong to local wildlife. The gate to my backyard workshop was unlatched, though I distinctly remembered securing it. Nothing was missing, but the unsettling feeling of invasion lingered. I dismissed these observations as paranoia, perhaps the work of curious teenagers exploring the shoreline. Then I found a violation notice tucked into my door frame. Unapproved exterior lighting fixture, $75 fine. The fixture in question was a motion sensor light I had installed the previous autumn, identical to those on several neighboring properties. This was my first taste of what would become a systematic campaign against my property and my peace of mind. My lakeside paradise was beginning to show its first cracks, and I had no idea how deep they would soon run. Margaret Thornhill carried herself with the rigid posture of someone who had spent decades commanding corporate boardrooms. She stood exactly 5 feet 6 inches tall, but her presence seemed to tower over anyone unfortunate enough to be in her crosshairs. Her silver hair was always perfectly styled in an immaculate bob. Her clothes exclusively consisted of tailored pantsuits in muted colors that projected authority without requiring imagination. When she spoke at HOA meetings, she did not converse, she declared. The violation notices began to appear with alarming regularity. 2 weeks after the lighting fixture citation, I received a notice about improper boat storage, though my small fishing boat was secured exactly as it had been for the past decade. The following month, I was fined for excessive natural debris because autumn leaves had accumulated on my property during a particularly windy weekend when I was away. Each infraction carried a fine between $75 and $150, with warnings that unpaid balances would accrue interest. I attempted to address these issues reasonably. I sent polite emails with photographic evidence showing my compliance with established rules. I scheduled a meeting with Margaret to discuss what appeared to be a misunderstanding. She received me in her lakefront home, a modernist structure of glass and concrete that contrasted sharply with the rustic character of most properties around the lake. Her living room featured framed copies of business magazine covers, on which she had appeared during her corporate career. "The rules apply to everyone, Mr. Sullivan," she informed me, not offering a seat. "The HOA has a responsibility to maintain standards. Your property has several issues requiring attention." She handed me a folder containing a new list of violations, including unapproved wind chimes and non-compliant mailbox design. When I pointed out that my mailbox was the standard model used throughout the community, she smiled thinly. "The board is implementing updated aesthetic guidelines. You will find them in your email by the end of the week." I complied with each demand, replacing fixtures, removing wind chimes, installing a new mailbox that matched the suddenly approved specifications. The costs were mounting, but more concerning was the feeling of being specifically targeted. During my next visit to the lake, I took a walk around the community and noticed striking inconsistencies in enforcement. The property belonging to Margaret's close friend, Diane Fulton, displayed wind chimes identical to those I had been forced to remove. Robert Chang, who served as HOA treasurer, had a boat stored in his yard using the same method that had earned me a violation. Community board meetings became exercises in frustration. When I raised concerns about selective enforcement, Margaret would cut me off mid-sentence. "The board has discretion in these matters," she would state, before moving to the next agenda item. Other homeowners would avert their eyes, unwilling to become the next target of her administrative wrath. Those few who supported me in private became mysteriously silent during official proceedings. After 6 months of this treatment, I noticed something even more disturbing. Items inside my cabin were being moved between visits. A coffee mug I always kept by the sink would appear on the bookshelf. Books were rearranged. My workshop tools were organized differently than I had left them. Nothing was stolen, but the message was clear. Someone was entering my property during my absence. I installed a small, discreet security camera in the main living area, concealed within a bookshelf ornament. 2 weeks later, reviewing the footage, my suspicions were confirmed. The camera had captured Margaret Thornhill herself entering my cabin using a key I had never provided. She moved methodically through the rooms, taking photographs, opening drawers, making notes on a clipboard. She spent nearly 40 minutes inspecting every corner of my private residence before leaving with a satisfied smile. The footage showed her returning twice more in the following week, once accompanied by another board member who looked uncomfortable but did not object to the unauthorized entry. During one visit, she specifically examined my circuit breaker panel, photographing it extensively before making a call on her cell phone. "Yes, I have documentation of another violation, I heard her say. Definitely not up to code. This one should be substantial. When the next violation notice arrived, citing dangerous and non-compliant electrical modifications and carrying a $500 fine, I felt something shift inside me. My frustration crystallized into anger. This was not about community standards or property values. This was systematic harassment backed by unauthorized invasions of my private property. Playing by the rules had got me nowhere. The time for civil compliance had ended. I needed evidence, strategy, and eventually justice. The monthly HOA meeting was held in the community boathouse, a rustic building with exposed beams and panoramic windows overlooking the lake. 24 homeowners sat in folding chairs arranged in neat rows. Margaret presided from a table at the front, flanked by her loyal board members. I had arrived early, setting up my laptop and a small projector I had brought specifically for this confrontation. When the agenda reached open forum for community concerns, I raised my hand. Margaret acknowledged me with visible reluctance. "Mr. Sullivan, please keep your comments brief. We have a full agenda tonight." I stood and connected my laptop to the projector. "I would like to address a serious security concern affecting our community," I began. "Specifically, the unauthorized entry into private residences." Without waiting for permission, I played the footage of Margaret entering my cabin, moving through the rooms, photographing my belongings, the time-stamp clearly visible in the corner. A hush fell over the room. Margaret's face flushed crimson, then drained to ashen white. She recovered quickly, reaching to turn off the projector. "This is not an approved presentation," she snapped. I continued despite her interruption. "I have documented 3 separate instances of trespassing. I have never provided a key to my property to the HOA or any board member. This constitutes breaking and entering, invasion of privacy, and possibly criminal trespass." Margaret's composure returned with practiced corporate skill. "As HOA president, I have both the right and responsibility to inspect properties for compliance when there are reasonable concerns about violations. Article 7, Section 3 of our bylaws permits emergency inspections where there is potential risk to the community." "There was no emergency," I countered, advancing to footage showing her leisurely examination of my bookshelves. "And Article 7 requires written notice 24 hours prior to any inspection, as well as homeowner consent or presence during the inspection." Margaret smiled coldly. "The board recently amended that provision under our Emergency Powers Clause. The update was included in last month's newsletter. Perhaps you should read communications more carefully, Mr. Sullivan." I looked around the room for support, but found only averted gazes. A few homeowners nodded in agreement with Margaret, while others studied the floor with sudden interest. The community I had once felt part of now seemed governed by fear and compliance. The next day, I consulted with Patricia Winters, an attorney specializing in property law. Her office overlooked the city courthouse, walls lined with legal texts and framed credentials. She reviewed my evidence with a frown deepening on her face. "HOAs wield extraordinary power," she explained after examining my documentation. "Courts tend to defer to their authority when the HOA can point to specific bylaws, even questionable ones. Fighting this could take years and cost tens of thousands in legal fees. Even with your video evidence, Margaret could claim she was acting within amended bylaws." "So there is nothing I can do?" I asked, disbelief evident in my voice. "I did not say that," Patricia replied carefully. "Document everything. Continue collecting evidence. Build a case showing pattern and prejudice. Meanwhile, review your HOA's bylaw amendment procedures. There may be irregularities in how these changes were implemented. As I was leaving her office, Patricia added, "Property disputes like this often have deeper roots. Have you considered why she might be targeting you specifically?" That question led me to visit Harold Mackenzie, the oldest resident of our lake community. His cabin predated the formation of the HOA itself. Harold had known my grandfather well, and at 87, his memory remained remarkably sharp. We sat on his screened porch watching the sunset paint the lake orange and pink. When I described my situation, recognition dawned in his weathered face. "Margaret Thornhill," he said, nodding slowly. "Her maiden name was Margaret Everett. Her father and your grandfather were business partners in a marina development back in the 70s. There was a falling out. Your grandfather withdrew his investment when he discovered some questionable accounting. The Everett family lost everything when the project collapsed. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. She is punishing me for something that happened before I was born." Harold shrugged. "Grudges run deep around this lake. Water holds memories." That evening, I stood alone on my dock. The sunset had faded, leaving the water dark and reflective like polished obsidian. 40 years of resentment had found its target in me and my beloved cabin. The legal system offered little protection against Margaret's abuse of power. The community stood paralyzed by fear or indifference. The ripples from my grandfather's past had reached across decades to disturb my present. As I watched the first stars appear in the darkening sky, I made my decision. Conventional solutions had failed. It was time to apply my particular set of skills to create an unconventional solution. If Margaret wanted to enter my cabin uninvited, perhaps she deserved a proper welcome. My engineering background has shaped how I approach problems throughout my professional life. When facing a technical challenge, I break it down into components, analyze constraints, identify resources, and develop solutions that balance effectiveness with safety. Now, I would apply this methodology to my Margaret Thornhill problem. I began by defining clear parameters. Whatever system I designed needed to: first, deter unauthorized entry; second, provide irrefutable evidence of trespassing; third, deliver consequences significant enough to discourage repeat violations; fourth, cause no physical harm or permanent damage; and fifth, operate autonomously with remote monitoring capabilities. My professional expertise proved invaluable. For 15 years, I had specialized in designing automated systems for manufacturing facilities. My company created custom robotic solutions that increased efficiency while maintaining rigorous safety standards. I had installed systems that could detect microscopic flaws in medical devices, sort thousands of components per minute, and operate flawlessly in environments from freezing cold to extreme heat. Creating a system to deter one trespassing HOA president was well within my technical capabilities. The concept came to me during a late-night brainstorming session. Paint, harmless but impossible to ignore, difficult to remove quickly, visually dramatic, the perfect solution for making visible an otherwise invisible crime. Not just any paint, but a specialized formula containing a UV-reactive component that would remain detectable under blacklight for weeks, even after washing. The trespasser would carry the evidence of their crime long after the visible paint had been removed. I converted my workshop into a development laboratory. Technical diagrams covered the walls, schematics for pressure sensors, wiring plans for the control system, placement maps for the delivery mechanisms. I spent weekends sourcing components, adapting existing technologies, and fabricating custom parts. Motion sensors from commercial security systems, pressure-sensitive floor panels disguised under area rugs, weatherproof cameras with night vision capabilities, Arduino microcontrollers programmed to distinguish between normal movement patterns and suspicious behavior. The heart of the system was the paint delivery mechanism. I modified compressed air canisters to propel the paint effectively but safely, enough pressure to thoroughly coat an intruder without causing injury. Each canister contained specialized paint I had formulated with help from a chemist friend who owed me a favor. The paint was non-toxic, water-soluble, eventually, but contained microscopic polymer particles that would bind to fabric and skin temporarily. Testing consumed 3 full weekends. I set up a mannequin on wheels and pushed it through various entrance points, measuring the coverage patterns and adjusting the nozzle configurations for optimal distribution. I recorded activation times, recalibrated sensors, and refined the targeting algorithms. Safety remained paramount. The system would not activate for quick entries and exits that might indicate a meter reader or maintenance worker. It required sustained, unauthorized presence to trigger. The installation transformed the cabin into an invisible fortress. I concealed delivery nozzles behind wall sconces, within decorative ceiling fixtures and underneath furniture. Pressure sensors went under strategically placed rugs. Motion detectors blended into the decor. The central processing unit, housed in a hidden compartment beneath the kitchen floorboards, coordinated all components and contained redundant power supplies. If one system failed, others would compensate. Programming the system required particular attention to prevent false activations. I created an algorithm that required multiple confirmation triggers before deployment. A legitimate visitor, like a neighbor checking on the property, would trigger an initial alert, but the system would remain dormant unless the visitor engaged in suspicious behavior like opening drawers or spending extended time examining personal belongings. The algorithm differentiated between normal movement patterns and the methodical inspection, behaviors Margaret had displayed in previous trespassing incidents. The final component was remote monitoring and control. I installed a cellular-based security system that would send real-time alerts and video feeds directly to my smartphone. The application allowed me to monitor all sensors, view live footage from any camera, and even deactivate the system remotely if necessary. I could watch events unfold in real time from anywhere with cellular service. Testing the complete system required methodical validation. I recruited a trusted friend to attempt various entry scenarios: legitimate delivery person, curious neighbor, determined intruder. We refined sensitivity settings and adjusted trigger thresholds until the system correctly identified and responded to unauthorized intrusion while ignoring innocent interactions. The paint cannons successfully deployed against simulated intruder behavior, covering my volunteer in washable paint that required significant scrubbing to remove completely. The final fail-safe feature was a prominently displayed warning sign visible immediately upon entry. Attention! This property is protected by automated security systems, authorized personnel only. This provision satisfied both legal requirements for notification and my own ethical standards. No one cowl. Declaimed they had not been warned. After 4 weekends of intense work, the system was operational. From the outside, the cabin appeared unchanged, the same rustic retreat it had always been. Inside, invisible electronic sentinels stood guard, ready to transform any uninvited guest into a walking testament to their own trespassing. The trap was set, the paint was loaded, and remote monitoring was active. I drove back to the city with a sense of preparation rather than anxiety. The cabin would protect itself now. If Margaret Thornhill chose to continue her campaign of harassment through illegal entry, she would face consequences more effective than any legal proceeding. Sometimes justice requires creativity, especially when conventional systems fail. I was not seeking revenge, merely providing irrefutable evidence of wrongdoing that could not be ignored or explained away. Monday morning found me in my city office, attending to business operations, while a portion of my attention remained fixed on the security app on my phone. The system had been active for 3 weeks without incident. Legitimate visitors, the mail carrier who left packages on the porch, the lawn service that maintained the grounds, triggered initial alerts, but never crossed the threshold that would activate the defense systems. The first sign of Margaret's renewed interest came on a Wednesday afternoon. My phone pinged with a motion alert from the property perimeter. The video feed showed her standing at the edge of my property, binoculars raised, studying the cabin with predatory intensity. She remained there for nearly 10 minutes, making notes on a small pad before departing. The system registered her presence but remained dormant, programmed to activate only upon unauthorized entry. 2 days later, she returned with Robert Chang, the HOA treasurer. They walked the perimeter of my property, stopping occasionally while Margaret pointed toward various features of the cabin. Robert appeared uncomfortable, checking his watch repeatedly and maintaining distance from Margaret as she gesticulated emphatically toward my dock. Again, they departed without approaching the cabin itself. The following Tuesday brought another alert. Margaret stood at my front door, testing the handle, then pressing her face close to the window to peer inside. The cameras captured her expression, a mixture of frustration and determination. She attempted to look through several windows before leaving. Her behavior was becoming increasingly bold, but still insufficient to trigger the main defense system. The situation escalated the following weekend. My phone chimed with a high-priority alert while I was having breakfast. Margaret had assembled what appeared to be an emergency inspection committee. Herself, Robert Chang, and 2 other homeowners I recognized from meetings, but did not know well. The group approached my cabin with purpose, Margaret leading the way with a clipboard and what appeared to be an official-looking document. The exterior cameras captured their conversation clearly. "This property has been reported for potential electrical hazards that may endanger surrounding homes," Margaret announced to her companions. "As the HOA board, we have both the right and obligation to inspect when community safety is at risk." One of the homeowners, a retired woman named Susan, looked uncertain. "Should not we contact the owner first? I am not comfortable entering without permission." Margaret produced a key from her pocket. "This is an official inspection under Section 12 of the bylaws. We have attempted to contact the owner without success. The potential fire hazard constitutes an emergency situation." The lie flowed effortlessly from her lips. There had been no attempts to contact me about any inspection. Robert shifted uncomfortably. "Perhaps we should document the exterior concerns first and schedule a proper inspection when the owner can be present." Margaret dismissed his suggestion with a wave of her hand. "We have legal authority under the emergency provisions. I have already consulted the HOA attorney." Another lie. I had spoken with the HOA attorney myself the previous week, who confirmed no such consultation had occurred. My heart pounded as I watched them approach the door. Margaret inserted the unauthorized key into the lock. The system registered the entry attempt, beginning its countdown sequence. When the door swung open, the interior entry light flashed once, the programmed warning signal that would give legitimate visitors a final chance to retreat or enter an override code. Margaret led her committee across the threshold, pointing out various features of my cabin with the confidence of someone who believed themselves completely justified. "Note the non-compliant electrical fixtures," she instructed, gesturing toward perfectly standard lighting installations. And here we have unauthorized modifications to the original struck. Sure, she referred to renovations approved by the previous HOA board years earlier. The system performed exactly as designed. 10 seconds after entry, with no override code entered, the defense protocol activated. The security feed showed the sequence in perfect detail. Hidden compartments in the walls slid open with mechanical precision. Small pneumatic cannons rotated into position, tracking the movements of the intruders through motion sensors. The lights dimmed momentarily, the final system-wide signal before deployment. Margaret noticed the lighting change first, looking up with momentary confusion. That expression transformed into shock as the first paint cannon discharged, releasing a stream of bright blue paint that caught her directly across her white blouse and tan blazer. Her clipboard clattered to the floor as she raised her hands in futile defense. The other cannons activated in sequential order, creating a choreographed display of colorful justice. Robert Chang received a thorough coating of neon green that transformed his golf attire into a psychedelic nightmare. Susan and the other committee member fared no better, one doused in purple, the other in orange. Each color had been specifically formulated with the UV-reactive compound that would remain detectable under blacklight for weeks. What followed was symphony of chaos. Margaret screamed, a sound of pure outrage rather than fear. She attempted to retreat toward the door but slipped on paint-slicked hardwood floors. Robert Chang stood frozen in shock, paint dripping from his stunned face. Susan and the other committee member collided in their panic to escape, creating an abstract painting of purple and orange on the entry rug. The entire deployment lasted 12 seconds. The cameras captured every moment from multiple angles: the unauthorized entry, the warning light, the ample time to retreat, and the eventual consequences of their trespass. Most satisfying was the expression on Margaret's face as she finally regained her footing and fled through the front door, trailing blue footprints across my porch. Her carefully constructed facade of authority had literally been painted over, revealing the true colors of her abuse of power. As they stumbled down the front steps, Margaret turned toward the cabin and screamed threats that the security system recorded with perfect clarity. "You will pay for this. I will have you removed from this community." Her face, partially obscured by dripping blue paint, contorted with undisguised rage. I saved the complete video to secure cloud storage and sent a copy to my attorney. The trap had sprung exactly as designed, transforming invisible trespassing into visible evidence that could not be denied or explained away. The reckoning had begun. The aftermath unfolded with the chaotic beauty of long-suppressed justice finally breaking free. My security system continued recording as the paint-covered inspection committee stumbled to their vehicles. Margaret attempted to maintain dignity despite being transformed into a walking canvas of bright blue paint. She issued commands to her fellow committee members that the microphones picked up clearly. "Not a word about this to anyone. This is assault. This is criminal. We will handle this legally." Within 2 hours of the incident, my phone rang with a call from the local sheriff's department. Deputy Collins, whom I knew from community events, spoke with barely contained amusement in his voice. "Mr. Sullivan, we have received a rather colorful complaint about your property. Any chance you might be available to discuss the situation?" I agreed to meet him at the local station, bringing my laptop with the complete security footage. Deputy Collins and his supervisor, Sergeant Rodriguez, viewed the video in a small conference room. Their professional composure cracked when the paint cannons deployed, Rodriguez turning away to hide his smile. "Let me understand correctly," Collins said when the video concluded. "You installed a non-harmful security system on your private property after documenting multiple instances of unauthorized entry. The system included visible warning signs and an alert light before activation. The paint is non-toxic and eventually washable. That is correct, I confirmed. I have documentation of 3 previous unauthorized entries using a key I never provided. My attorney has advised me that I am within my rights to secure my property against trespassers. Sergeant Rodriguez nodded slowly. Mrs. Thornhill is demanding your arrest for assault and battery. However, what I see is a trespasser who ignored posted warnings and entered private property without authorization. The property owner took reasonable nonviolent measures to document and deter criminal activity. The legal situation grew more complex the following day, when I received a certified letter from Margaret's attorney, threatening a lawsuit for assault by paint and Aisha's booby-trapping with intent to harm. My attorney responded immediately with a countersuit for trespassing, invasion of privacy, harassment, and abuse of HOA authority. She attached complete documentation of the previous unauthorized entries and the fraudulent inspection justification. 3 days after the incident, the story found its way to local media. The Lakeshore Chronicle ran the headline, HOA President Caught Blue-Handed in Alleged Trespassing Incident. The article carefully avoided direct accusations, but noted that Margaret and several HOA board members had been involved in an incident involving security measures at a private residence after entering without the owner's permission. Social media exploded with speculation and commentary from community members who had long chafed under Margaret's regime, but had previously remained silent. An emergency HOA board meeting was called the following weekend. I arrived early to find the community boathouse packed beyond capacity. Margaret sat at the front table, her composure intact despite the faint blue tinge still visible around her hairline and neck. Under the fluorescent lights, traces of paint were clearly visible on her hands despite what must have been frantic scrubbing. This emergency meeting will address the assault on board members during the execution of their official duties, Margaret began, her voice steady, but underlying with rage. Such actions cannot be tolerated in a civilized community. Before she could continue, Harold Mackenzie stood from his seat in the front row. At 87, his voice still carried the authority of the community's oldest resident. Before we discuss anything else, I move that we address the unauthorized key that was used to enter private property. As a founding member of this association, I recall no provision that allows board members to possess keys to private residences without explicit owner permission. The room erupted in murmurs of agreement. Other homeowners stood to voice similar concerns. The unified front Margaret had long maintained through intimidation began crumbling before my eyes. Robert Chang, still showing traces of green around his ears, shifted uncomfortably in his seat beside her. In the midst of the chaos, I received a text message from Deputy Collins. County prosecutor reviewed all evidence. No charges will be filed against you. Considering trespassing charges against Thornhill pending further investigation. As the meeting devolved into open revolt against Margaret's leadership, I realized the paint had accomplished something beyond my expectations. It had not just marked the trespassers. It had made visible the invisible patterns of abuse that had plagued our community for years. What had been dismissed as individual grievances was now recognized as a systemic problem. Margaret's reign of terror was beginning to wash away, one stubborn paint stain at a time. The legal proceedings concluded with anticlimactic efficiency. The county prosecutor officially declined to pursue any charges against me, citing clear documentation of repeated trespassing and reasonable security measures that caused no physical harm. The determination stated that property owners maintain the right to document unauthorized entry through non-harmful means, and that the security system in question provided ample warning and opportunity for retreat before deployment. Margaret's civil lawsuit collapsed during discovery when her attorney learned that the key she had used was obtained by falsifying documents. She had submitted a form to the original developer's office claiming to need a replacement key for emergency purposes, forging my signature on the authorization. The developer's office had failed to verify the signature before providing the duplicate. When this evidence emerged, Margaret's attorney withdrew from the case, citing irreconcilable differences regarding case strategy. The transformation within our lake community proved most remarkable. Years of accumulated resentment toward Margaret's regime catalyzed into organized action. A petition for special elections circulated among homeowners, quickly gathering the required signatures for a board recall vote. Several signatories still showed faint traces of colored paint when they arrived at meetings, their physical appearance a visible reminder of the governance failure that had occurred. The special election resulted in Margaret's removal from the board by a margin of 38-4. Robert Chang resigned his position as treasurer voluntarily, citing personal reasons and a desire to spend more time with family. A new board was elected, led by Susan Jenkins, the reluctant purple-painted committee member who had questioned the unauthorized entry from the beginning. Her first official act was to commission a complete review of HOA bylaws, with a focus on transparency and homeowner rights. Under new leadership, reasonable rules turned to our community. The 15-page newsletter shrank back to its original 2-page format. Violation notices became rare and were issued only for significant issues affecting community well-being. Property inspections now required 48-hour written notice and owner presence or explicit permission. I installed a conventional security system with proper community notification and approval. The paint cannons were decommissioned, their purpose served, though I keep one as a conversation piece in my workshop. At the following summer's Lake Community Barbecue, the incident had transformed from scandal to community legend, retold with increasing embellishment by neighbors who claimed to have witnessed the Technicolor exodus from my cabin. Margaret Thornhill sold her lake house the following spring and relocated to a gated community in another state. I occasionally see Robert Chang walking the lakeshore at sunset. He nods politely when our paths cross, a silent acknowledgement passing between us. Some community members swear that on particularly bright moonlit nights, when the UV rays hit just right, you can still see faint traces of colorful footprints leading away from my cabin. My grandfather's photo sits on my mantle, overlooking the lake he loved. I like to think he would appreciate how I protected our family legacy, though perhaps with less technological flair. The cabin remains my sanctuary, my weekend retreat from the demands of everyday life. The morning mist still hovers over glassy waters. The loons still call across the lake at dawn. I have learned that home ownership comes with responsibilities to one's community. I have also learned that some lines cannot be crossed without consequences. Even the most powerful HOA president is not above the law or basic human decency. Sometimes justice requires standing your ground, and sometimes, just sometimes, justice comes in Technicolor.